Welcome, everyone. My name is Jesse J. Holland. I am the author of the upcoming, soon on your bookshelves, Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda anthology. And here with me tonight are three of the awesome writers who contributed some great stories that you're going to be able to read when you pick up Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, which will be everywhere on March 9th. So I'm going to introduce all of these writers, and we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves. We'll talk a little bit about the Black Panther. We'll even maybe get into some things that we're doing next. So stick around with us for the next 40 minutes or so for some great conversation. So first is the Grand Master, Linda D. Addison. It is so great to be here with you tonight, Linda.
Hey, Jesse, you my Black Panther. You know, I'm gonna keep calling you that. If you're gonna call me Grandmaster, I'm gonna call you my Black Panther. So
there we go.
Nice to be here.
It is nice to be anywhere these days. Coming up next, of course, is Milton Davis, the man with the hat. Hey, Milton, my man, so great to see you tonight.
It's great to be here, great to be seen, as they say.
Last but definitely never, ever least, is Glenn Paris, who's holding down Atlanta for all of us. The real Wakanda in America is Atlanta. And Glenn's holding it down for us, right, Glenn?
ATL all day long. How you doing, Jesse?
It is absolutely great to be with the three of you tonight. Once again, Black Panther Tales of Wakanda will be in bookstores and available online through your reading apps and orderable everywhere on March 9th. Remember, pick up this book and think about getting it from some of our independent and Black-owned bookstores, because after the pandemic, they need all the help that they can get. So we're going to talk a little bit of Black Panther tonight. So I'm going to go through a couple of questions, and I'm just going to throw it out there and let our great writers write. I'll let our great writers talk. So Linda, let's start out with you.
Yes.
What made you decide to take part in Black Panther's Tales of Wakanda? You are a Grandmaster. You have a Bram Stoker. You know what? Let's just show us your Bram Stoker. Let's see it right now.
Okay, this is the latest.
No.
The latest.
Did y'all hear that? The latest Bram Stoker.
I have 5. I was the first Black to get 1. So it's been it's been a run. But now there's more Blacks that have gotten it since me. So that's wonderful and delightful, because me drinking by myself in the Bram Stoker room, it's not a good look. I'm just saying.
So with all of that, with all of your awards, with the fact that you're a Grandmaster, what made you decide to take part in Black Panther Tales of Wakanda?
Well, I mean, there's 2 things, right? First of all, Black Panther. I mean, world-changing, life-changing on every level, from economics to social. That's the whole thing. And then the other thing was that from June to December of last year, I was in a lingering coronavirus symptom situation. So, to sit and at one point after the wonderful Chadwick passed, I was watching TV and they're doing a thing on him, and I was crying. I was literally crying when the opportunity to do the story for Black Panther came. And I didn't know if I had the energy and strength to do it, but I was like, all right, Chad, let's do this. Because it felt like it was like a real coming together of meaningful coincidences. So
Milton, you love swords and sorcery and fantasy. What made you bring that flavor to Black Panther Tales of Wakanda?
Well, I have to agree with Linda. It was about the fact that it's Black Panther, and the other was because I have a large amount of respect for Chadwick Boseman and what he did, and this is my kind of way to having the opportunity to pay homage to him. And I feel like there's a synergy between Black Panther and Sword and Soul. So this is an opportunity to be able to show that within the within the confines of Black Panther. So I was really excited about doing it.
Now, for those of us out there who don't know what Swords and Soul is, explain to us what you mean by saying Swords and Soul.
Okay, well, Sword and Soul is a name that was given by Charles Saunders, who has actually the originator of it and was the first Black person to write a sword and sorcery character, Imaro. And Sword and Soul is basically sword and sorcery that is based in African diaspora cultures and traditions.
All right. So, Glenn,
What's
I
up?
have seen Glenn's work, and Glenn is awesome. Glenn, what made you put away some of the stuff you were doing? Because, you know, if you don't know out there, writing is time consuming. What made you set aside some other stuff and pick up the pen and write Black Panther?
Well, Black Panther and I go back way, way, way back. I remember back in the 1960s, must have been about 68 or so, in a barbershop, I read the Fantastic Four issue where he first appeared. And what I can remember, and you know, in medicine, you know, your memory is just about everything. Well, I remember a specific panel where the Black Panther tells Reed Richards that he's sitting on a $20 million bench. And it's seriously, that made such an impression on me that this guy had a $20 million bench that he had to tell somebody what it was worth. I mean, at that point, I was hooked. I followed the Black Panther ever since then. I used to try to draw when I was a kid. But when the movie came out, you know, and Chadwick Boseman had already reprised that role in some of the other movies. But when he got to the very end, that just brought both sides of the Atlantic together for me. And it, you know, I have a guy who works with me who's from Gambia, you know, and he said, yeah, that was a very emotional movie for me, you know, because he thought that you know, at the time he thought that all the actors were from Africa. And he says it really portrayed a lot of, you know, what they feel towards America. And at the same time, it felt it showed what African Americans, you know, wish for, hope for, you know, thought about the homeland. And you know, I just love the last line of Michael B. Jordan. When Jesse announced at DragonCon, we were on a panel together. He announced at DragonCon that he was doing an anthology. I mean, I just couldn't shut my mouth. I said, Jesse, can I contribute to it? And he's like, you know, and it was so funny because it was, who is this guy, Glenn Paris? It's like, yeah, sure, send me something.
And I will tell you, Glenn kicked the door in. I didn't know Glenn from Adam at DragonCon, had never met him before. I said the words Black Panther, Glenn was like, get out of my way, I'm getting in this book. And knocked it out the park. So let me just tell you, all 18 writers who are in Black Panther Tales of Wakanda all turned in completely awesome stories. And not just about T'Challa. Some people wrote about T'Challa. Some people wrote about Shuri. Some people wrote about the Dora Mahali warriors. Some people went into the Black Panther's past. Some people came up with completely original ideas, all surrounding the world of Wakanda. So don't forget, you can pick up Black Panther Tales of Wakanda on March 9th. You can have it in your hands. But I'm going to take 2 seconds here to say, Glenn, let me just tell you, I know that first appearance of Black Panther was in Fantastic Four back in 1966. So let me just tell you, I read it as a back issue because I wasn't alive back then. So you might want to just reverse that a little bit and say, no, you picked up the back issue. You didn't read it when it first came out, right?
Yeah, I didn't read it when it first came out because I couldn't read then. But
there you go.
I was 8 years old and I was in a barber shop, and it was 68, so it was a couple years old. They got some used comic books, had a box of them, but that one I read. That one I read from front to back. 8 years old.
That brings up a really great question. The Black Panther exists in the Marvel universe, the Marvel Comics universe, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the Marvel Literature Universe, which we have all of these great books about the Black Panther being told by these great writers. So, Linda, what was your first introduction to Black Panther? Was it the comic book? Was it the great comic series that they did on BET with Reginald Hudlin directing it? Or was it the movie? What was your first introduction to Black Panther?
I'm actually going to say it was the movie. I mean, I was aware of his existence in the comics, but it was the movie that did it for me. And as I said, watching it brought tears, chills, breathtaking, laughter, everything. And then to go on and see how much it changed the world, what an impact it made, was everything.
Milton, what was your introduction to the world of Wakanda?
Well, I knew about Black Panther from the comics. I'm a casual comic collector, but two of my best friends are like the serious comic collectors. You know, the guys that go into a comic book store and read 10 comic books and then buy one. And those are my friends. So I knew about Black Panther. I read them occasionally, but the impact, I'm like Linda, the real impact of it hit me when I saw the movie. And because of how it was presented, and also writing Sword and Soul for so long and doing research in Black and African culture, I'm looking at the way they set up everything, and I'm seeing all this different symbolism from different cultures in Africa. And I'm sitting there with my wife saying, hey, they got that from the Yoruba, they got that from the Zulu. And my wife's like, will you just shut up and watch the movie? But that's what really captured me and really got me excited about Black Panther.
Well, I will tell you that I was like Glenn. I've been reading comic books since I was 5. And my father, which I didn't know this until maybe only about 3 or 4 years ago, my father was a comic book collector. So he stopped at one point, but he stopped before I was born. So when I started collecting comic books, I'm thinking I'm all rebellious and unique. And I'm doing a radio show maybe about 5 years ago. And the radio show host, as a surprise to me, brings my parents on. So I'm in Washington, my parents are back in Mississippi, and the host goes, and here's your father. And he asked my father, well, how did your son start reading comic books? My father was like, it's because I read comic books. And I'm like, what? He was like, yeah, I collected comic books when I was a small child, 10, 11, 12. Everybody in the neighborhood used to come over to our house to read my comic books. And I was like, so where are these comic books? Why have I never seen them? He was like, well, back in 1977, your grandmother told me to come get my comic books out of her house. And I didn't quite make it there in time, so she threw them all in an incinerator. I'm like, no. He was like, I had the original Spider-Mans, I had Zorro, I had Superman, because he was collecting back in the early 1940s and 50s. Mm. He had them all, and they ended up in an incinerator before he could give them to me. So when my mom called me and said, come get your comic books out of my house, I drove a U-Haul from Washington, D.C. to Mississippi just to get my comic books. So I'm also one of those people like Glenn. I grew up in the comic book medium. I've been reading, I followed Black Panther from Fantastic Four to Avengers to the unfortunately named Jungle Action to Marvel Comics Presents to the great runs by writers like Christopher Priest, the great runs by a writer like Ta-Nehisi Coates. I followed him all the way through because this character means a lot to me, not just as a comic book fan, but also as a Black man. So I want to ask y'all this question about T'Challa and the world of Wakanda. What does this character mean to you? What has been the impact of the Black Panther and this mythology that the world just loves, Linda?
Well, for me, I feel like when the movie came out and you could see, on TV, in the movies and videos and stuff, the impact it made on the Black community more than anything else. And I grew up poor in the Black neighborhoods, and to see, and I'm not saying just poor Black neighborhoods, but in general, to see suddenly this representation of us in an Afrofuture way, in the sense that here's an alternate way of us being, where we have this depth of culture, of history, of power, That's the thing to me that was just so wonderful, to feel the sense of power that is in the storytelling for the Black community.
Milton, what makes the Black Panther important to you and to other people around the world who dream of one day living in a Wakanda?
I think what it did was we finally saw something that was centered Afrocentrically without a Eurocentric gaze, put it that way. And that's what you get from Black Panther. And to me, the movie did that the most. I mean, I've been delving into this Afrocentric world with so and so for a long time, but to see it, on display like it was in the movie, and for it on that level, with that type of investment, and seeing how it affected everybody else. I mean, my church actually got people together to go see the movie, and to me, I think it kind of it was the first time we actually saw something about us that was centered on us at that level. And I think that's why it has such an impact. And I know for me as a writer, it has really opened up a lot of doors to what, I create and other people that I know create, because now people are aware of it, and Black Panther has made that and made it accessible to that audience.
Glenn, what do you think? What makes the World of Wakanda so important? Not just to the United States, but to the world, but specifically to you?
Well, I'm an Afrofuturist. I've been writing about, African Americans or descendants of the African diaspora for a long time. My work in Dragon's Day, I use a lot of African references. So when I saw this, this apex civilization with this amazing technology, not afraid of any force on Earth. At the end of Civil War, when Captain America says, if they ever find out what Wakanda has, they'll be coming. They said, let them come. I remember those words. So, just knowing that, and it did have an impact on everybody at levels that I would never have guessed. I mean, I'm a nerd and I admit it, all right? But I'm also a physician, and I went to Atlanta Medical Association dinner, and it was a Wakanda theme. I mean, everybody was dressed with kente cloth, and there were these recurrent Wakanda themes and references to the movie, and this is in 2018. And I'm thinking, wow, usually, Black physicians are very, very conservative, but, this was just everywhere. I mean, we were talking about, 80-year-old doctors, 70-year-old doctors, 25-year-old doctors, students, everybody was into it. Everybody was into it. You talk to people who are from West Africa or East Africa, they were into it. The African Americans were into it at every generational level. I mean, that kind of impact is unheard of. You have Koreans who are interested in this. You have Japanese, Chinese, you've got Australians, you got people from all over the world that are enamored with this. I mean, this really hit it out of the park. And I don't think that even the creators realized what kind of impact they were going to have. This had the impact of Roots, to be honest with you. This had the impact of Roots.
I completely agree with you. And one of the things that I noticed, especially behind Black Panther, but also going back a little further, when you see entertainment that's been written like Get Out, you see movies that are coming up that are Afrocentric focused. There's not just Black people in the movie's about Black people. And we've talked a little bit about this privately, but I'm going to bring it up here on air as well. It's only been maybe in the last 20 years where the door has opened for Afrocentric writers in the realms of comic books, in the realms of science fiction and fantasy, in the realms of horror, and in the realms of television. So I can tell you, if Glenn was anything like me, and he was a comic book nerd, and he showed up at a comic book convention, he was the only chocolate chip there. Or if he went into a comic book store, he didn't have to worry about anybody else in there mistaking who he was, because they could look and see who he was, and the comic book store owner knew his name because that was the only Black person he saw in there. So these worlds have completely opened up. And Linda, we were talking earlier about when we go to these science fiction conventions. In the good old days, we'd be alone at the bar looking around trying to see if we can find anybody else in the crowd doing the same thing we do. Has that world changed, Linda?
I rarely even looked around because I've been doing this for 45 years. And when I went to conventions, if there was one other brown skirt person in the audience or in anywhere, it was like, you know, some kind of magical hookup. But now it's different in many ways, but not, you know, it's still, but now it's a lot different than it was 40 years ago for sure.
Milton, sorcery, swords, soul. Are you alone in this area, or are there other people out there now who you can find, who you can talk about these things with?
It's changed a lot. When I first met Charles back in 2008, he was the only other person that I knew of that was writing Sword and Soul the way it is. I always felt like there had to be other people there because I know I'm not a genius. I'm not the first person to sit down and come to doing this stuff. It's just too much stuff out there, and that was the reason why we did our first anthology, Griots, was to give people that we knew were out there the opportunity to speak it. But now, I mean, it's really grown. You know, you've got a lot of African fantasy authors out there right now. You got Tony Adeyemi with Children of Blood and Bone. You got other gentlemen that I know, Royer, who has a comic book called Malika that just got picked up by Dark Horse. So you've got African-based fantasy at a much higher level than it was years ago. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the fact of Black Panther and realizing, and people realizing that this is something that everybody's interested in. You know, it brings a new perspective, a new flavor, and a new energy to sword and sorcery. And it's been picking up like wildfire.
So Glenn, it sounded like you had some of the same experiences I did going to the comic book store. And I finally got to the point where I started bringing my boys with me because I got tired of being in there by myself. Even though they didn't want anything, I'm like, y'all just got to roll. We just going to all roll together so I won't be in this place by myself. Was that your experience as well, Glenn?
Well, no. See, I grew up in New York. So, you know, in the section of, Hollis, Queens, all right? So, we grew up in a place where, we could go down to the candy store and we could buy comic books, and it was just us. We could go to the, I went to school in the Bronx, and we could go to a newsstand. I could pick up comic books, in Manhattan. So I actually had a situation where I wasn't the only one, but, among our folks, I was the nerd, and it's like, okay, what's with this guy in the comic books?
I do remember with my best friend when we were in college, I went to the University of Mississippi, and every Wednesday, Memphis, Tennessee, to go to the one Black-owned comic book store that Memphis, Tennessee had. And we'd go to our pull boxes and pull out the comic books that we had told Larry to pre-order for us and head from the bookstore to Crystal Burgers. And we'd sit there and we eat our Crystal Burgers and read comic books. Got to the point where the manager of Crystal Burgers, we had a standing order. He knew, oh, it's Jesse and Rodney. Come on, man, sit down here. I got your order in just a minute. Now, when they start recognizing you in a fast food restaurant, you've been doing something for way too long. Now, if you're enjoying this conversation, I want everyone to know that you can hear more writers like Linda, like Glenn, like all of our writers, like Milton. You can hear all of us speak later on this year. In fact, in a couple of weeks at the great Dillard University, coming up on March 10th, all of these writers you see here on screen and more, Cherie Renee Thomas, Keoko M, Danny and Daryl Jerry, will join everyone you see here on screen, and we will be facilitated by the great Dr. Mona Lisa Saloy. So you see the information there on screen. If you want to hear more conversations like what you're seeing right now, you can join us on Wednesday, March 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern on Zoom, sponsored by Dillard University's English program, School of Humanities. This is a great conversation. We get to continue having this conversation on March 10th, and I want everyone out there to join us. Remember, that's only one day after your order of Black Panther Tales of Wakanda shows up at your house, because I know everyone out there is pre-ordering the anthology right now. Once again, Black Panther Tales of Wakanda is going to be available to you on March 9th, and then on March 10th, you get to see all of these writers on screen talking to you. Glenn, what's up, man?
Hey, one other thing. Supposedly, there's an audio book coming. Okay.
Oh, not supposedly. Okay.
Okay.
Not supposedly. Not only will you be able to read Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, you're also going to be able to listen to it. An audiobook of these great stories will soon be available. We're still working out some of the details on who's going to be reading it, who's going to be featured on it, but you will get a chance to not only buy an audio CD, it's going to be available on Audible. So not only can you buy it and read it, you can also buy it and listen to it. It's going to be great for everyone. Now I'm going to do something that's going to be a little bit unfair to everybody watching. I want all of you to tease the story that you're writing in Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. We don't want any spoilers. This is a no spoiler zone. But I want you to tell people about the name of the story you wrote and give them a quick hint, just a little bit, it's a little bitty taste of what your story is about. Linda.
Well, my story is called Shadow Dreams. And I was really wanted to explore. It starts off with a young woman who's a young girl who's arriving. She's 14 years old, arriving into the grand city, you know, the main city of Wakanda, to be trained as a warrior. And her journey through that, and some very strange things that happen. And it all, I'm always I've been drawn for a long time to the whole idea of multiple realities and alternate universes. So I get to play with that through this young woman's journey from going in and the training that she goes through.
All right. I can tell you, having read Shadow Dreams, that it is just awesome. And you know how when you hear certain lines from the Black Panther movie, like bury me in the ocean, like my ancestors who knew that death was preferable to bondage, it just makes you shiver. When I think about Linda's Shadow Dreams, it just makes me shiver. Now, Milton not only jumped into the world of Wakanda, he took us all the way back to the beginning. So Milton, tell us the name of your story and give us a hint on what it's about.
Okay, the name of my story is The Monsters of Menanagai. And it actually came from a story that T'Challa told another character in the comic book series about Bashinga. And it was and when I was doing my research, that was the one character that resonated with me because it kind of touched on what I normally write. So what I decided to do was to go back to that story that T'Challa told and flesh it out and give more details to it. And the only other thing I'll say about it is that there was one question about the Wakanda universe that always nagged at me, and I didn't really find an answer to, so I decided to answer it myself.
And that's what the greatest literature has always been about, having a question and finding a way to answer it. Now, Glenn, we're not going to give away all of the good stuff in your story, but tell us what you wrote, tell us the title of your story, and give us a hint of not only the world of Wakanda, but perhaps even the larger Marvel universe that it contains.
All right, so my story is called The Underside of Darkness. And this takes place over 100 years ago, and it's about one of T'Challa's ancestors. There's a delicate truce that exists between Wakanda and Atlantis, and has for a long time. This ancestor of T'Challa, a Black Panther, has to very delicately weave that truce and preserve it before there's a catastrophe that envelops all mankind.
Oh, nah, come on. You can't just tell me that you just cannot wait to see how that ends. And this is just a small taste of all of the great stories you find inside Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda. I personally told a story myself in there that also answered a question I had about T'Challa and the religion of Wakanda. You know, T'Challa's patron patron goddess is Bast. Bast adopted Wakanda because Bast originally was from the Egyptian pantheon. So she adopted Wakanda and made Bashinga and his descendants her stewards. But she never said for how long. So I pick up in faith the question of how long will the Black Panthers be Bast's chosen rulers of Wakanda? Because you know, sometimes things change. So with all of these great stories, you get to answer some questions that you've had about the world of Wakanda. You get to read some of the great work that all of these writers have put in to these tales. So before we wrap up tonight, because believe it or not, it's almost quarter till the top of the hour. So before we wrap up, I want to know what all of you are doing next, because I know all of us are always working on multiple projects at the same time. While you're writing Black Panther, you're also, if you're like most of us, you're also working your day job.
Yep.
But then you have 2 or 3 folders on your laptop with everything else you're working on at the same time. So I want to know from each of you, what are you doing next? Linda, what can we see next from you?
Well, if you go to my site, Linda Addison Poet, you'll see I have quite a few poems, nonfiction coming out. And the thing that I'm working on right now is my first science fiction novel. It's hard fiction, it's hard science. And it again plays with the idea of multiple universes. It's far, far in the future. I mean, I've always been very much into quantum physics, so I get to play with that too. So I'm having fun with it.
Not only is Linda a grandmaster, not only is she a multiple Bram Stoker Award winner, she's now an expert in quantum physics. Oh my goodness. Can I not be more impressed? Milton, what can your fans who are going to start following you from Black Panther to whatever comes up next, where can they find you next?
Well, actually what's coming out next for me is another anthology called Cyberpunk. And it's basically taking an Afrocentric turn for the cyberpunk genre. And that's going to be dropping pretty soon. So I'm really excited about that. And there'll be me and a bunch of other authors in there. And so that's what you should be looking for next from me.
Where can people find you?
They can find me at www.mvmediaatl.com. Me and
all right. So Glenn, I know you working hard. Glenn is one of the hardest working men in the ATL. So I know you got a bunch of stuff coming.
To my mystery doc series, The Renaissance of Aspirin, coming out. I won't share the title just yet because it's not published yet, but it features one of the very interesting characters from the first book. I'm working on the prequel to Dragon's Heir, the Archaeologist's Tale, science fiction book coming out from Outland Entertainment. And I'm working on a series of vampire short stories, a collection of those that include Unbitten, A Vampire Dream, The Tooth Fairies, and Red Rose Rain.
Wow. So not only are all of these great writers appearing in Tales of Wakanda, you can find them everywhere else. Glenn, you forgot to tell us, where can your fans find you?
At glennparis.com.
So you remember those websites? Go and follow them on not only on their websites, but also on social media. Keep in mind that once again, on March 9th, you will get your copy because you're going to go pre-order Tales of Wakanda right now. You're gonna switch over to another screen and go to Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, or your independent Black-owned bookstore, and you're gonna reserve a copy of Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, so it'll show up on March 9th. But don't forget, you can also find us on March 10th at Dillard University, online, not at Dillard University. You can find us online, doing a program with Dillard University, the Louisiana's first HBCU, where you can find the 3 great writers you see on screen now, Linda, Milton, and Glenn. But you can also see Cherie Renee Thomas, Keoko M, Danny and Daryl Jerry, and of course myself on March 10th, Wednesday, March 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern, where we'll continue this conversation and take it to even new levels. Once again, on March 9th, you can get your own copy of Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, the first anthology featuring the first mainstream Black superhero, the Black Panther. I would like to say thank you to all of these great writers for taking time out of their busy schedules to sit and talk with us. Once again, my name is Jesse J. Holland. You can find me at www.jessejholland.com. Also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at that same name. Once again, look out for Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda coming out on March 9th. Pick it up online and from your independent Black-owned bookstore. I promise you, you're going to absolutely love it. Linda, Milton, Glenn, thank you so much for taking time and being with us tonight.
Thank you, Professor Howard.
Thank you for having me.
And once again, thank you all of you out there for listening to us. Keep in mind, you can hear us again on March 10th at 6 p.m. Eastern. Go to Dillard University's website. You'll be able to find us. It has been my pleasure talking with y'all tonight. Once again, Black Panther, Tales of Wakanda, available on March 9th. Thank you so much, everyone. And it's always good to see y'all. Wakanda forever.